The 30th of January, 1933. Adolf Hitler is appointed Chancellor of Germany, bringing an end to German democracy. A critical component of the Führer's rise to power is the Sturmabteilung, also known as the SA, a paramilitary organization associated with the Nazi Party, which by the end of 1933 counts more than 3 million members. Soon, its leader, Ernst Röhm, will start to demand the removal of German elites from power and their replacement with fanatical Nazis. However, Hitler needs the support of these elites, particularly the military leadership, to consolidate power and ultimately sees the SA as a threat. During the Night of the Long Knives, he purges the SA, effectively ending their political and military power. One of Hitler's closest allies from the German military leadership is Werner von Fritsch. Thomas Ludwig Werner Freiherr von Fritsch was born on the 4th of August, 1880, in Benrath Castle near Düsseldorf, then part of the German Empire. His upbringing was shaped by his strict father, Lieutenant General Georg von Fritsch, who put great value on love of country, reliability, duty, and honor. He was such a merciless disciplinarian that his son would find it difficult to form close relationships throughout his life. After graduating from high school, Fritsch joined the army, and in January 1900 he was promoted to lieutenant. However, military service offered ambitious Fritsch only limited opportunities for advancement, and he found it difficult to make friends. Fritsch therefore applied to the War Academy in Berlin, and after passing the difficult entrance examination, he began his studies in October 1907. He was an outstanding student and excelled above all with his knowledge of war history and tactics. The First World War began on the 28th of July 1914, and Fritsch served as a general staff officer in various capacities. In 1917, he was wounded in the head by a grenade fragment and was awarded both classes of the Iron Cross. The First World War ended on the 11th of November 1918, and in the period of the Weimar Republic, which was the name given to the German government from 1918 to 1933, Fritsch continued to serve in the army. In 1924, Fritsch wrote a letter to Joachim von Stülpnagel, a German military officer, where he expressed his hatred of democracy. He hoped that General Hans von Seeckt would carry out a putsch to establish a military dictatorship, and wrote that he believed that Germany was being ruined by what he called the propaganda of the Jewish papers. Fritsch ended his letter with a list of all whom he hated. The list included Friedrich Ebert, the first president of Germany from 1919 to 1925, pacifists, Jews, Democrats, and all people that, as he claimed, wanted to destroy Germany. Fritsch said, "There may be small differences, but in the end, it all amounts to the same. We can trust only ourselves. Trustworthiness, truth, and love only there is among us, German men." Werner von Fritsch was heavily involved in the secret German rearmament of the 1920s, in which Germany sought to evade the terms of Part 5 of the Treaty of Versailles, which had essentially disarmed it by limiting its army to 100,000 soldiers and forbidding it to have aircraft or tanks. As such, Fritsch, who worked closely with the Soviet Union with a secret rearmament, favored a pro-Soviet foreign policy and had an extreme hatred for Poland, to which Germany had been forced to concede Poznan, West Prussia, and Upper Silesia. As early as 1928, Fritsch began work on the plan that became known as Case White, which was the German military codename for the invasion of Poland. In the late 1920s, however, Germany was not ready for such an invasion and instead had to deal with economic hardship, social unrest, and political instability. On the 30th of January 1933, Adolf Hitler was appointed Chancellor of Germany by President Paul von Hindenburg. Fritsch was a strong supporter of the new regime, which he saw as a radical force that, if influenced by people like himself, would be a force for good. In February 1934, Fritsch was promoted to Chief of the Army Command, partly because Hitler saw him as a supporter of his regime, and partly because Defense Minister Werner von Blomberg valued Fritsch for his professionalism. Although Fritsch was a strong Hitler supporter, he perceived the Sturmabteilung, the Nazi paramilitary organization also known as the SA, which was under the control of Ernst Röhm, as a threat to the army. Once the Nazis came to power, Röhm wanted the SA to replace the professional military as a people's army. Consequently, in 1934, military leaders agreed to support Hitler's undermining of the SA's power and the elimination of much of its leadership in exchange for a guarantee of their status as the sole national military organization. On the 30th of June 1934, when the SS murdered Röhm and many of the SA's top officials, the military did not intervene. The Nazis also murdered other old enemies with whom the regime had a score to settle, such as General Kurt von Schleicher, who had preceded Hitler as Chancellor and had criticized his cabinet. In his speech to the Reichstag, the German parliament, on the 13th of July justifying his actions, Hitler denounced Schleicher for conspiring with Röhm to overthrow the government and alleged that both Schleicher and Röhm were traitors working in the pay of France. This purge became known as the Night of the Long Knives. In late 1934 or early 1935, Fritsch and Blomberg successfully pressured Hitler into rehabilitating the name of General Kurt von Schleicher by claiming that as officers, they could not stand the press attacks portraying him as a traitor working for France. Fritsch was a convinced anti-Semite, and the anti-Semitism of Adolf Hitler was one of his most important reasons for supporting the Nazi regime. In early 1934, when Blomberg ordered that all soldiers who might be considered Jewish be given dishonorable discharges, Fritsch made no objection and carried out the order. In December of the same year, Fritsch announced that it goes without saying that an officer should seek a wife only within Aryan circles, and that any officer who married a Jewish woman would be dishonorably discharged at once. In May 1935, a major reorganization of the armed forces resulted in Fritsch taking the new title of Commander-in-Chief of the Army. In April 1936, when Blomberg was promoted to Field Marshal, Fritsch received promotion to Blomberg's vacated rank of Colonel General. On the 5th of November 1937, at the conference between the Reich's top military foreign policy leadership, Hitler stated that it was the time for war, or more accurately wars, as what Hitler envisioned would be a series of localized wars in Central and Eastern Europe in the near future. Hitler argued that because the wars were necessary not only to provide Germany with Lebensraum, meaning living space, but the arms race with France and the United Kingdom made it imperative to act before the Western powers developed an insurmountable lead in the arms race. Fritsch was very critical of that demand, as he knew the army was not ready, and even went so far as to threaten to resign his command. Fritsch and several other military officers advised Hitler to wait until Germany had more time to rearm. They did not have any moral objections to Hitler's strategy, with which they basically agreed. Only the question of timing divided them. Ever since they seized power in Germany, the Nazis were trying to take control of the army, and it came in very useful when it turned out that Defense Minister Werner von Blomberg had married a prostitute. In January 1938, von Blomberg was forced to resign from his position after revelations about his wife's past, leading to concerns about his judgment. Hermann Göring, Commander-in-Chief of the Air Force, did not want Fritsch to become the successor to Blomberg, and thus his superior. Heinrich Himmler, the leader of the SS, wanted to weaken the Wehrmacht, the German armed forces, and its mainly aristocratic generals to strengthen his SS as a competitor to the regular German army. In 1936, Reinhard Heydrich, head of the Reich Security Main Office, had prepared a file on Fritsch that had allegations of homosexuality and had passed the information on to Hitler. Hitler had rejected it and ordered Heydrich to destroy the file, but Heydrich did not do so. In 1938, Heydrich resurrected the old file on Fritsch and Himmler with Göring, inspired by the resignation of Blomberg, accused the unmarried Fritsch of engaging in homosexual activity. Although Fritsch had never been a womanizer and had preferred to concentrate on his army career, he was forced to resign on the 4th of February 1938. However, after Fritsch's resignation, it became known that the charges against him were false. The Gestapo had been misled by a statement made by petty criminal Otto Schmidt, who had confused Fritsch with a cavalry captain of the same name. Members of the German officer corps were appalled at the mistreatment of Fritsch, and at the next meeting, Himmler, Göring, and even Hitler came under pressure from them as the case against Fritsch was seen as weak. Schmidt withdrew his accusation against Fritsch, and although he was formally acquitted on the 18th of March 1938, the damage to his reputation had been done. Although the army demanded he be restored his former position as commander-in-chief, Fritsch was only made honorary colonel of an artillery regiment. Hitler took further advantage of the situation by replacing several generals and ministers with men even more loyal to him, and took more effective de facto control of the Wehrmacht, which de jure he already commanded. Following his acquittal, Fritsch attempted to challenge SS leader Himmler to a duel. Fritsch composed a formal challenge and reportedly practiced his pistol skills in his free time, of which he had plenty, as an officer without a command. The letter was given to General Gerd von Rundstedt for delivery, but Rundstedt, seeking to bridge the distrust between the Wehrmacht and the SS, ultimately convinced Fritsch to abandon the idea. Despite the false charges, Fritsch remained loyal to the Nazi regime and maintained his firmly held belief that Germany was faced with an international Jewish conspiracy that wanted to ruin the Reich. On the night of the 9th of November 1938, the Nazi SA, SS, Hitler Youth and German civilians destroyed Jewish homes, businesses, synagogues, hospitals and schools throughout Germany, annexed Austria, and in areas of the Sudetenland in Czechoslovakia, which had recently been occupied by German troops. This event, which became known as the Kristallnacht pogrom, or Night of Broken Glass, marked a transition to an era of destruction, in which genocide would become the singular focus of Nazi anti-Semitism. A few days after the Kristallnacht pogrom, Fritsch wrote a letter to a friend in which he also said the following: "Of course the battle with international Jewry has now officially begun, and as a natural consequence that will lead to war with England and the United States, the political bastions of the Jews." The Second World War began on the 1st of September 1939, when Nazi Germany invaded Poland. Just before the outbreak of World War II, Fritsch was recalled and chose to personally inspect the front lines as the colonel-in-chief of the 12th Artillery Regiment during the invasion of Poland, a very unusual activity for someone of his rank. Werner von Fritsch was 59 years old when on the 22nd of September 1939, during the Siege of Warsaw, he was hit by a Polish bullet which tore an artery in his leg. 1 minute after he was hit, he lost consciousness and died. Fritsch was the second German general to be killed in combat in World War II, the first being SS commander Wilhelm Fritz von Röthig. 4 days later, Fritsch received a ceremonial state funeral in Berlin. However, though both Hitler and Himmler were in Berlin on that day, neither of them showed up for the funeral to pay their respects. There were no tears shed for Werner von Fritsch. Thanks for watching the World History Channel. Be sure to like and subscribe, and click the bell notification icon so you don't miss our next episodes. We thank you, and we'll see you next time on the channel.